All right. So layouts in Backdrop. We're going to give a little introduction here on the front end, and maybe I'll take a minute or two and look at the code behind layouts in Backdrop as well. So we went over it a little bit in the brief demo that Backdrop has a new section of your site called layouts. And this takes precedence over the block system in Drupal 7. So in Drupal 7, themes owned the regions and themes owned the placement of blocks within your site. So you might, like the defining characteristic of any theme was usually, this is a 3-column theme, this is a bootstrap-based theme, you know, or what have you, that every theme was almost defined by the number of columns it had and the grid system it used. That whole concept is kind of thrown out the window with Backdrop because the number of columns and the grid system that you use is at the layout level, not at the theme level anymore. And so if I were to go over to the appearance page, for example, you know, the basis or the different themes here, I can switch different theme, but it doesn't have any effect on my layouts. And visiting the blocks page, which is where you used to place all of your blocks into individual regions, now instead of having a list of all of your regions here, the blocks page is literally just a list of the custom blocks that you've created. So all of the layout and positioning functionality of block module is no more. It's now block module is only about custom blocks. And if you want to, you can easily turn off block module because all it's doing is allowing you to create reusable blocks and place them on your site. So I'll create a custom block here just for demonstration purposes. Doesn't really need that. Okay. Also, interesting from the note earlier today, you can see here by the link here that this is configure. So blocks like this, reusable blocks, are not content. They are configuration. So this is being saved into a JSON file. And that's, I mean, for another thing implying that is that this is under structure. And so usually that means that stuff is being saved into configuration. Oh, and it makes it so that blocks, as a site builder tool, they can be deployed across environments. So we try to have as many things as possible within layouts, at least, not be dependent upon the database. So you can move them in between different environments using config management. So layout land is under structure layouts. And you can see that instead of having one single layout for my entire site, Backdrop doesn't restrict you in any way from the different, like using different layouts for different paths. So on the home page, we have a single column layout, but the rest of the site, we're using this default layout that puts a sidebar on the right-hand side. And then the administrative layout is what we're looking at right now, where it is also using the single column layout. But the administrative dashboard uses a 50-50 split. So this page that we were looking at earlier is actually just a pre-configured layout that has blocks placed on it out of the box. So I want to, let's, for demonstration purposes, make a new layout. And since we only have a set amount of time and we already have the home page that is like a layout that you've just created a path, and the dashboard is like that too, I'm going to demonstrate overriding a current path instead, like an article, or I'm sorry, post. You know, posts are one of the two content types that come out of the box in Backdrop. I'm going to use a left-hand column layout instead of a right-hand column layout, and I'm going to put it at an existing path. And internally, and if you don't use Path Auto, you guys probably know that the paths for content is node/node ID. And so typing in an existing path back, or the layout module says, sure, you want to add a layout to node/%. You can do that by using this path, and it picks up under the context area the fact that that's going to be a node. So if I were to have an existing path like this, you can see that contexts disappear because there aren't any IDs for it to convert. So when a context is present, it takes an ID out of the URL, loads that object, then makes additional information and blocks available to you on that particular path. For example, if I wanted to have this affect posts, but not pages, then I could select node type from the list here and say this layout should only apply to posts. And what this will do, so it drops me into the layout configuration page. I might add that reusable block, which I just call demo block. Same thing, multiple locations. Also for demonstration purposes, I might put a custom block in here and demonstrates that you can also just create a custom block that is not reusable. And so if I check this box, then what it does is it's just a shortcut to make it so that it will create a reusable block and save it into the with block module and save it into the reusable blocks list. But if I just create a custom block that is not reusable, then it only exists on this layout and nowhere else. I wonder, I mean, there's also things kind of akin to views where you can specify custom classes, or if you want to, you can configure a whole bunch of things, the headings, the wrappers, all of that sort of thing using the dynamic style. And visibility conditions are very similar to what we saw on the layout level, that I can also make a block show up on a per block basis with any number of conditions, users' permissions, the node type, language, whatever. I'm not going to add any conditions though. Just save that block and save the overall page. I'm going to go to the home page where I can demonstrate the about page. This isn't great because you can't see the right column because there's nothing in it. But in the page layout, there's no left column. But on an article layout, like this here, first post, here we go. Here's the demo block that is the reusable block, and then the non-reusable block right below it that has the left column present. And so the world of layouts, we totally expect you to have a fair number of layouts on your website. Like one layout for each content type wouldn't be unexpected. Just kind of like views, you end up with kind of a lot of them as you develop your site to structure things, make landing pages is a really common use case for layouts. It is just so nice that I know in Drupal 7, it's like, what is your homepage? Like, I've seen a lot of websites where people make a view that doesn't load any content and then just place a whole crap load of blocks on it. And I've seen the same thing for nodes, that they'll create a node, they don't put any content in it, or maybe they'll sometimes put one paragraph in it, and then they'll place blocks all around it. So the homepage is like mostly made up of blocks, but sometimes it's a node, sometimes it's a view. Sometimes, I mean, if you know what you're doing in Drupal 7, then you use panels, and maybe your homepage is a panel instead. Backdrop makes it really easy to make these landing pages that don't fit within the concept of this is a content type, because the landing page doesn't have any real content to its own name. It's all just the aggregation of other types of content all assembled together. So Backdrop solves that problem with the concept of layouts. Does this raise any questions for anybody?
What happens with mobile sponsored features? In other words, if I've got my site, I've got implementation. I've got video, CSS. So it goes down, things disappear. Certain blocks disappear. And then I've got blocks that appear for mobile.
That's a great question. We don't have the concept in core of making entire blocks appear or disappear based upon screen size. We could, though. This system for conditions is extensible, so we could potentially make it so that when you're configuring a block, sorry, I went to the wrong page here. When you're configuring a block, we could potentially set up a layout condition, a visibility condition that was like we could add media queries in here to the list of available things. That's an interesting idea.
And all it would have to do is add a class, and we could have a set of helper classes in core that could be used by any traffic to do it.
Yeah, the way that you would do that right now without a module of any kind is that you would probably just under the style settings just assign the block a class, and then in your CSS specify a media query for like, you know, this is only shown on like medium screens or something like that. You know, I don't think that hiding and showing entire blocks of content is usually really recommended, but I can still see, you know, there being situations where you might do something like that.
Not that when you have things like I often have a US map where like when it's big you can like click on Rhode Island, but on a mobile phone there's no way your finger's gonna so you switch it up really.
Yep. Great. Well, I also wanted to give you guys a little bit of insight into the way layouts are actually structured from the code sense, which is why I'm doing this on my local computer instead of the demo site. So I'm going to pull up on my computer. Sorry, I can't increase the screen size for things like my file browser. But I'm going to pop into the, so first of all, there's a layouts directory in core. Like if we just look at the general site structure of Backdrop, there's the core directory in which all core modules live. And then files, which is where your files are uploaded. Layouts, which is where custom or contrib layouts live. And by default, there's nothing in here except for a README file. Modules, contrib and custom modules. Sites, we have multi-site capability in Backdrop still, but it's not. We're not like pushing you towards multi-site. When you install Drupal, it puts your settings.php file under like default settings.php and puts your files directory under sites default files. But Backdrop is out of the box driven towards the single site use case, and so rather than putting your settings.php someplace that is hidden and nested, it just puts it right in the root. And instead of putting your files directory in someplace nested, it just puts that right in the root too. And then the sites directory is like, if you want multi-site, then that is available to you, but it won't use it otherwise. And then the themes directory is for custom themes. Git and .idea, those are just ideas, my local IDE. And Git is because this is a Git checkout. So going into core layouts, here's a list of all of the layouts that are in core out of the box. And I might take an example like Moscone, which is the single column. Maybe I shouldn't use Moscone because it's a little too simple. Moscone doesn't even, it does have a template in here. Okay. So let's take a look at the .info file. And this might look fairly similar to you guys. Who here has done any theming or made a custom theme? Okay, so maybe this won't be familiar to everybody, but this is the .info file for the Moscone layout. And if you've done any theming in Drupal 7, this should look really familiar to you because it looks a lot like a theme.info file, especially the regions collection here. And so if you're upgrading from Drupal 7 to Backdrop, common thing to do is to take your theme, copy the regions out of it, and create a layout that has the same regions in it. And that will allow Backdrop, when you do your upgrade from Drupal 7, to copy your blocks out of your theme and then put them into the equivalent layout in that you've created that matches the same regions. We also have some other minor things that are important. Default region is actually optional. It will always be content unless you specify otherwise. You can also do pre-processing if you want to by adding a PHP file, any specialized CSS, and then if you've got an image for the preview, that's this little thumbnail, very little thumbnail that shows up in the administration section here as being the indicator of what your layout actually looks like. I've seen this on many of Jen's websites as she builds them, that sometimes she'll turn off the core layouts and create new ones instead. And when she creates the little preview icon, she color codes it to match the color scheme of that individual brand. And so like if this were the Lullabot's website, all the layouts would all be red, indicating that this is like a custom layout created for this individual site, while the gray ones are left for the core ones. And then the template file, I realize the doc blocks are going to be a little bit hard to read, but template file is pretty vanilla. Drupal 7 style templating, where you print out. It is a lot like the page template file from Drupal 7, and if you were upgrading your Drupal 7 site into Backdrop, you would take your page template, rename that into being a layout template, because your page template is where the regions exist within your theme in Drupal 7. And you convert that over into a layout template in Backdrop, and you can leave your layout essentially all the same, update the variables slightly to adjust. Backdrop also, for the core layouts, it's worth noting, you can see some of the styles in here that there's no CSS file for Moscone or actually for any of the core layouts, but they all depend upon the Bootstrap grid system. And so all of the layouts that are in core out of the box are all Bootstrap based layouts, which means that if you want to assemble your own layouts, a lot of times you won't need to even write any CSS for them. You can just copy one of the core layouts, adjust the columns, and then you can get pretty much any layout you can think of without writing any CSS at all, or adding any additional grid systems, because Bootstrap's already in there out of the box.
Can you disable that?
Can you do what?
Or you can add, like in your layouts, you can add whatever you want.
Yeah.
In your theme, you can remove.
So I'm not sure we actually have time for this. I'll frequently go through and I'll make a new layout just for kicks, but. Okay. Well, we won't do that. All right. Do you guys have any other questions that I can answer real quickly about layouts, just conceptually? It's a really big paradigm shift. Actually, the difference from Drupal 7 though is like we can do everything Drupal 7 did really pretty easily. When you upgrade your site from Drupal 7, what Backdrop will do is it will create an equivalent layout for you, but usually only one, because Drupal 7 only had one layout. The theme only had one possible position for all of the blocks to be in. So when you do the upgrade from Drupal 7, Backdrop will create one custom layout or update the default layout to just do everything that Drupal 7 did. And then from there, you can then create as many additional layouts as you want, which we would usually encourage, rather than this crazy idea of having one list of blocks for your entire website and then configure every single one of those blocks to like show up in different regions or different pages or whatnot. Like Backdrop really drives you to just say, if you're going to be positioning different blocks, create different layouts, rather than this one massive layout that just has a crap ton of conditions on everything. So makes organizing things a lot easier. From a site administrator's view, they can see pretty directly like what blocks are on which page, just by going to that individual layout and editing it. And if there are conditions on there, then the conditions also show up in the preview area, which we didn't get into that, but the conditions also show up. I'll just configure this right here. Visibility conditions, so I might say if this is only, I only want to show this to administrators. There it is. So it puts little conditions thing in there. So this block has conditions on it, and it's only shown to the administrator role. Okay, that's it for the little layouts demo.